People that are dying of asbestosis and asbestos-related diseases, and I wouldn't call it limited harm. That site is a toxic dump. In the report, it's 0.4 metres. It's covered in asbestos and arsenic site, but I think at 60 metres, from a vantage point of 30 metres in the air, I can see much further than 70 metres. I would have a good vantage point over the surrounding area. This site doesn't really give the people of Derby or the people of Alvaston what it really needs. The analysis by a company called Cllr that did some work for Derby City Council in 2012 highlighted this real need for things like bungalows and ground floor flats for people with physical disabilities, in wheelchairs and so on.
Under the committee, you will see that this application will have a serious impact on a nice suburb of Derby, namely Alvaston. I hope you've all read the objections, that 437, all from local residents. This has got to be one of the most objected applications to have ever come before you. And I praise those who organised themselves so that 437 objections could be registered rather than one through a petition. This is how strongly local people feel about this application. Whilst I respect your deliberations as the planning members and the legal issues that you have to go through, I would like you to consider talking about local democracy here. Local residents' opinions should be considered, and you couldn't get a louder comment than 437 objections. I pointed out some of the issues in my objection letter, including the fact that this is contrary to the local plan and this application does not fit well in terms of additional new buildings. This is so out of keeping with Alvaston that the development is from another world. If I could mention some of the history of Alvaston and the flats and apartments, we had the Isle of Wight blocks of flats at the end of Alvaston Lane. These had to be demolished as they had become a blot on the landscape and a slum. These were 4 stories high. We also have Brindley Court in the ward, which was converted to luxury flats, allegedly. We had many problems with these over many years, and we have managed to reduce the incidence to minor antisocial behaviour. Alvaston is for houses. Where we do have flats, they are the same level as the roofs of the surrounding houses. This development will be a monster invading our spaces. Whilst I'm intrigued by the design methods, I feel this sort of development is best suited in the city centre, where there are many types of these buildings around them. In your report, you talk about, in section 7.5, it talks about section 106 funding, and the fact that the developer says there is no money in it for him to provide this. Yet the report does not mention the agreement that the developer has agreed to a deal with the smaller block. My meeting with the Blom representative in early January made it clear to me that the smaller block would be offered to the council either as a whole or at a knockdown price. The council will be aware of this and will surely have an influence on your decision today. I hope this is taken into account in legal terms. I ask you to reject this outright.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add to Robin's sentiment, really. Predominantly around that area are 1930s houses, private on one side and council, some private now on the other. It is a transient area between industrial, commercial and residential, and it is on the fringes of Alvaston, and it is a brownfield site which we do want developed. But this development is just not at all in keeping with Alvaston and the area. A 1960s out-of-dated tower block next to 1930s houses, in my opinion, is a disaster for us to go down that route. The council has already stated that they've got concerns about noise and they're trying to mitigate those with the developer. Well, if that's the case, surely the site should be redeveloped, as Robin stated, with traditional houses that are in keeping with the rest of Alvaston, and not something as large as this. I thought we'd gone away from these tower blocks and large buildings. So why now? I know we've got strains on housing, but that shouldn't be a reason for us to succumb to something as extreme as this. The I-Way survey that mentioned by Councillor Graves, it's not been answered really, that it was done, I think, mid-morning on a Thursday. And it's a pertinent point, because if that is the case, it really should be readdressed and looked at busier times. It's not fair to just assess it with a mid-morning survey. I'd like a definitive answer on that, please. And really, we've got 437 objections here, and surely I've not heard anything in defence of the residents of Alvaston, and surely where's the consideration there of what the residents are stating to us?
Would somebody like to move to the vote? All those in favour of the recommendation? Five, including me. All those against? Five.
I think that's made clear.
Yeah, that was 5-all, but as my casting vote, the planning application is approved.
Chairman, when did you vote the first time? I'm not disputing that you can use your casting vote to vote with your Labour colleagues.
Sorry, what are you
but you
disputing?
did not vote in the first round. We did.
Yes.
Can I propose, Chair, we have a re-vote, please?
Can you please be quiet, otherwise I'll have to ask them to escort you out.
Couldn't be fast. The results were what I expected. Completely overlooked my property. It's 19 metres from my back bedroom window. There's not enough cycle storage, and the traffic report is not worth the paper it's written on. But you know, that's politics.
It was never, should have been even thought of, never mind about built. Nobody considers people in Alvaston anymore, and they never will do now that's going up. Thank you.
Well, I was concerned about the levels of asbestos and arsenic in the ground, and quite concerned that they've gone to the point of saying that they will put hard-to-dig areas in at 0.5 metres on that level. Well, hard to dig isn't impossible to dig, and groundbreaking and diggers and all the works going on is going to, in my mind, release many fibres into the atmosphere in the surrounding area of asbestos. I don't think it's a development we actually need. I think they've ignored their own reports from 2012 stating high demand for bungalows and ground floor flats, and I don't think it's the modern technology they're talking about. I mean, precast concrete being shipped over and erected on site, that's not a new innovation. That's something that's been built before and knocked down since.
What about the voting? How do you think? What happened to
I thought the voting was a disgrace. I thought the chair was acting as a conductor, not a chair. He, unlike all the other votes that went on that night, he actually waited for 30 or 40 seconds, putting pressure on the 4 people at the front to make a decision, who were, in my mind, were abstaining from the vote up until that point. When the 4 at the front...
The Planning Committee have just decided to pass the block of flats, the 2 blocks of flats on Raynesway, 8 stories and 3 stories, despite the fact that there was a lot of objections to it. The interesting thing that happened tonight, which was devastating for local residents, is the fact that the councillors didn't seem to want to vote for it, but they seemed to be persuaded to vote for it. And the vote was split 5-5. Unfortunately, the chairman, who was in favour of the application, voted twice on his casting vote and passed it. Now, to me, that is a very controversial decision. And in my view, he should have taken the side of the residents, because there was 437 objections. This is quite devastating to Alvaston area.